Thank you very much, Mr. Atkinson. The Canadian Urban Transit Association, Mr. Leclerc, President and CEO.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Honourable members of this committee, first of all, I would like to thank you for having invited me to appear before you today for your 2018 pre-budget consultations. I'm Patrick Leclerc. I'm President and CEO of the Canadian Urban Transit Association, CUTA. CUTA is the main spokesperson for the Canadian transit sector. We represent all transit networks in the country, providers, private and government organisations, as well as mobility partners and affiliated organisations. I would like to thank the government and parliamentarians and members of this committee for their unwavering and unprecedented support for transit. The advantages of increased investments in transit can already be felt. Transit investments turn into more prosperous communities, communities that are more green, more fair, and especially communities that offer better life for their inhabitants.
Has provided short-term funding of up to $3.4 billion to support the rehabilitation and modernization of transit systems. Many commitments have already been made under the first phase of PTIF. While most projects will be completed within the prescribed time frame, the time needed to conclude bilateral negotiations and approve project lists, the complexity of transit infrastructure projects, the procurement process, and limited construction seasons have created some delays, and unfortunately, some projects will not be completed by the required deadline of March 31st, 2019. Therefore, CUTA is urging the government to confirm that all funds committed to communities under the first phase of the Public Transit Infrastructure Fund remain earmarked to transit with the same funding conditions and criteria after the March 2019 deadline for project completion. Au-delà de la première phase du fonds pour
Beyond the first phase of the Public Transit Infrastructure Fund, the federal government will inject over $20 billion over a 12-year period for transit. Such investments must be based on sound data from industry so that we can objectively evaluate and measure the effect of investments from the government. CUTA is internationally recognized for its leadership, its experience, and its expertise in the collection and analysis of Canadian industry data for transit. Indeed, we have the biggest data collection program in Canada. Yearly, we collect over 1,003 different unique data points for every single transit member of CUTA, 98% of all transit in the country.
The need for evidence-based decision-making and CUTA's experience and expertise in leading the most important national transit data program, we recommend the government partner with us in establishing comprehensive performance metrics and mandate CUTA to track, analyze, and report to the government in a harmonized way on the industry's progress and outcomes of transit investments. We're also following closely the creation of a climate change strategy. One of the most effective ways to reduce emissions from passenger transport is to measure transit's direct and indirect contribution to reducing GHG emissions through modal shift, the reduction of traffic congestion, and densification. We're recommending the government clearly identify modal shift from single occupancy vehicles towards sustainable mobility options such as walking, cycling, transit, carpooling, car sharing, just to name a few, as a key objective and performance metric of federal transit investment to reduce GHG emission. Finally, Mr. Speaker, the Canadian transit manufacturing sector is a remarkable success story. Our bus and rail manufacturers and their suppliers lead the North American transit market, and the Canadian transit industry supports nearly 75,000 high-quality, good-paying jobs. However, it's with great concern that the industry has seen the implementation of an increase to the Buy America requirement for transit procurement in the United States. We believe that the government must leverage the current trade discussions with the U.S. to ensure Canada's transit industry has fair access to U.S. market, especially at a time where the Canadian government is making record investment in transit. It's critical that we treat our transit manufacturing industry as a strategic sector to defend, protect, and promote. The Government of Canada should therefore seek fairer access to Canadian companies in U.S. public transit procurement by requiring that Canadian components receive national treatment in the calculation of Buy America requirement. Merci, Monsieur.